In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at modeling this contact lens case. This is going to be something that you would actually be able to 3D print too, because our focus is going to be to create a closed object. We're also going to focus on the fact that if you can learn just 5 tools in Blender, you can model a great many things. We're also going to take a look at 5 secondary tools that will really augment how you use those 5 primary tools. So let's get started. I'm going to just remove everything that I have here in my start file, and we're going to hide that as a reference. Shift and S, cursor to world origin. Let's come in and look at this from the top view. I'll remove perspective, Shift and A, and we're going to create a plane that I'm going to make 2 inches. I'm using inches. It's what I'm going to use for this. I know not everyone uses inches. Press the Tab key, and we're going to immediately subdivide this. And let's go to a total of 3 subdivisions, so we have 4 polygons across and down. And we don't need, I'm going into face mode, we don't need these bottom 4. So I'm going to remove those. The origin is right here. Let's go back into object level mode, come up to object, set origin, do geometry to origin, just so that we get that centered right around the center of our 3D universe. Let's come back into edit mode by pressing the Tab key, vertex mode, and we're going to select that single one there, Shift S, cursor to selected, leave edit mode, pressing the Tab key, Shift A, and we're going to add a circle, and let's make it 0.4 inches, and I only want a resolution of 24. You don't want this to be too high a resolution, but we also want it to be sufficient for what we're doing, and 24 is a good number. It also leaves a point at every 90-degree position. So let's zoom down over this area that we're going to work on, and I'm going to come back into edit mode for the primary object. In fact, I'm going to come up here and call this contact lens. We'll call this one case. So let's come over, select the corner. So the first thing that we're going to do in terms of the tools that you want to really learn to use, especially when using subdivision surfaces, is the bevel tool. The bevel tool is just simply one of the most useful tools, especially when you're doing hard body modeling. I like to select the tool in advance, even though you can just press Command B at any time to bevel. I like doing it because it gives you the options to pre-configure it in advance. So I want to do a value of 2 for the number, and then I want my shape to be 1, which will preserve the existing topology, putting new vertices on either side of the existing vertex we have selected. And we need to go into vertex mode, grab this, and pull out until you get something about like that. Then we're going to reselect these 2 points, and then we're going to change this to a value of 4, but we want to go back to 0.5, which is a round shape. Click, hold, and drag, and we're going to pull out until we get something about like that. And this will leave a point in the middle, which is what we want. The next tool that's going to be really useful is the knife tool, and there are a couple of variants of it. There's a knife cut tool and there's a knife project tool. Let's use the knife project tool. So we created the circle, and even though we're in edit mode for the current polygon mesh we're editing, if we select at an object level this circle, we can come up to the mesh tool and we can do a knife project, and that will basically stencil in that geometry. Then we can just come in and begin connecting vertices to other vertices on the existing mesh. This is important because we're creating a subdivision surface object, and it needs to be patched together in a proper way that will allow for predictable subdivision. So the next tool that you're going to want to really learn to utilize that's so useful for these types of models is the Connect Vertex Path tool. Let's switch over into vertex mode. This has been imprinted into the current mesh. So if we look at this, we have a polygon here and we have a polygon here and so on. But we need to dice this up into primary quads, and we might have a few triangles here and there. We're going to do that with the Connect Vertex Path function. So in vertex mode, select this vertex and this vertex. Now note, I'm in any tool. You can select things in any tool. I'm going to come back up to the Move tool because it will be tempted to think that that widget is doing something for us, and it's not right now. Bring up the context menu and invoke Connect Vertex Path, which is the J key. So we've divided this into two polygons here and here. Well, let's go ahead and consider how it is that we want to do this. Take this point and I'm going to connect it to there, press the J key, and then here and here, press Shift R, which repeats the last command. So our thought process is that we want to try and have as many quads as possible and triangles to kind of fill in areas where you can't have quads. So I'm going to come over here and go to here and to here and to here. So I've selected 3 points, and the cool thing about this tool is that it remembers the selection order, and you can press the J key to connect those. Then I'm going to come over here and here, bring up the context menu, and then do triangulate faces to kind of fill in that area. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at is configuring these polygons here to no longer just be these n-gons, but to be properly diced up quads. So let's zoom in, switch over into vertex mode, and the logical thing to do to dice this up into quads is to take these corner points and connect them like this. So I just press the J key, come over here and do the same thing, J key, here and here, and J key. And then what we need to do is figure out how we can dice these up to create matching points to connect these up. So I'm going to select all of these points around here that will have matching segments. And you can see how, because these edges are filled in between the points, even though we're in vertex mode, it's going to know that we actually want to operate on the edges between those 2 points. Bring up the context menu and do subdivide, and then increase that to a value of 2 to produce 3 total segments. So then we come in and again, we use that Connect Vertex Path tool function. And here we select 4 vertices, press the J key, and it creates a polygon in the middle. So then we just come in like this and this, J key. And then quickly, you can break this up into 3 quads for each segment, J and J. So we're left with this segment and this segment. Here again, we're going to back up to the other tool that you'll use a lot, the knife tool. So this is one of the primary tools that I spoke about. In this case, we're going to simply use it in cut mode. Press the K key, click on this vertex, come to the center, and click, right-click, and then click this point, and right about in the middle, it doesn't need to be absolutely exact, click and return. The knife tool is super, super useful. Let's come in and take a look at another use for the knife tool. Down here, we have this segment, and I'd really like to dice this up into a predictable way also. I'm going to take that point. We don't have anything to match it up to over here. So again, we can press the K key, click this point, X key to constrain, and then click here and return. Let's zoom back down over here. And I'd like to take this and anchor it up here, but I really want to get this point exactly to this position here. So we're going to take this and press the G key, X, and then press the B key, click this, and bring it to that location so we know that these are exactly aligned. I'm going to take that point and just sort of move it over. Then here again, I can take this point, hold the Shift key and take this point. And once again, we're going to invoke the Connect Vertex Path function, and it will add a point in between. Then we just need to come over here, select this polygon, bring up the context menu, and triangulate. Switch back to vertex mode, click to deselect everything. And again, we're going to go back to one of our primary tools, the knife tool, K. Come down here, press the Y key, and click and return. K, and just repeat this process, Y, click and return, K, Y, and click. And there we have diced up the primary sort of the backbone of the mesh. So we've gotten one half of it diced up, and we don't need to do the other half. We'll let the mirror modifier handle that for us. But we're going to be creating thickness here because we're going to be creating a solid object. And we need to create the thickness for that. But the first thing that we need to do to prepare for some of the geometry that's going to be on the underside is to create an inset around the perimeter. Let's come over into face mode, press the A key, and one of the secondary tools that we're going to use is the inset function. So click the I key, and we're going to pull this in about that far, something about like that. Okay, then let's come in, press the A key. One of the other primary tools that you're going to end up using a lot is the extrude tool. Press the E key. That's the same as coming over here and doing an extrude region. It's pretty intelligent in how it detects the geometry that you have selected in terms of knowing how to operate. So press the E key, and let's pull down about that far. Press Option Z to leave X-ray mode. And then on the bottom, we're going to double click the perimeter. So that goes all the way around. Now, the way that this is formed is that on the bottom, there's a lip that goes all the way down. And I'm basing this off a real contact lens container that I have. So we need to do that. But there's also one other thing that we need to do to prepare for that. As part of the structure is there's a sort of a support lip that comes down around this way. So let's come over on the side, and right about along here, we want to use the knife tool again. So press the K key, come about here, press the Z key because we're going to constrain to Z, but we want it to project all the way through. So press the C key, and you can see that activate at the bottom. Click and return. And then we can see this here. So let's come back over, double click here. And then on the bottom, we only want the bottom. So we're just going to manually click along here. I don't even need to go all the way over, but I'll go ahead and do it onto this side. This is all going to get thrown away. So let's come over, press the E key, and we're going to pull this down about that far. Let's come in and remove these 4 polygons. We don't need them. So X key, remove the faces, and then we'll return back up to the top. Let's select those 4 faces again for the top thickness. Press the I key to inset just a little bit. In fact, let's do an expand selection, and then press the S key to scale these out just a little bit. Something about like that. Reselect these 4 faces. E key, here again, our primary extrude function. I'm going to exaggerate that quite a bit just to come up. And then the I key again to come in just a little ways. And then E key again takes us down. I'm just sort of eyeballing it. I'm not even concerned with how deep I went, because again, I want to exaggerate it pretty far down, and this will make sense here in a second. And then let's come in so we can kind of see the top. In edge mode, we want to select just these. I know it's a little bit hard to gain access to these perimeter edges like that. And then let's come back down and look at this from the side. Option Alt Z so we can see through, and we're going to come over back to our bevel tool. So one of our primary 5 tools that we're going to use a lot. And we want to be in a shape of 5. We want to make sure we're in edge mode. And let's take this up to maybe 6, and then go ahead and grab this and pull up. Now, your eye should look at the bottom. Do you see how it's overshooting just a little bit? I want to get about there to where I can start to see the overshoot, and then come down to where it says clamp overlap. And then let's actually take this up to a value of 7, and that'll give us just a little bit better refinement. So let's switch over into vertex mode. And this is why I said we don't need to worry about the height, because we can configure everything. Let's come over into the move tool, make sure you're in select box, grab those vertices and move them down. And then we're going to grab all of these, and we're going to move these down just about something about like that. So it's sort of coming down into the thickness a little bit. Don't worry if it exceeds this area. That's just fine. So now we need to come in, Option Z, and we need to add some loop cuts, and this brings us to one of our other 5 primary tools that you really want to learn to use, and that's the loop cut function. You can access it by clicking the icon or pressing Command or Control R on the PC, but the behavior is slightly different depending on whether you click the icon or press Command Control R. So let's go ahead and click, hold, and drag and put a loop there, and click, hold, and drag and put another loop about right there. Let's add a little bit of rounding around here. Come back over into edge mode, double click here, come back into our bevel tool. So once again, we're back to the super useful bevel tool, but let's take this down to a segment of 3. Shape of 5 is good, but I want to be able to grab and create the bevels by selecting existing geometry. Our widget is off the screen, so make sure that you're in active tool. Click, hold, and drag and pull out until you get something about like that. Let's do the same thing for the perimeter around here. So I'm going to double click, and then we will just double check. I always just double check the values for segments and shape, and the active tool is fine. Click, hold, and drag and pull down about like that. Now, this loop right here, this boundary loop, it's probably a little far out. So I'm going to double click this, click here, and you have to look for these forks in the road where that stops. Hold the shift key, double click to keep that going all the way around. And then we're going to zoom in. Now we're going to use one of the secondary tools that you'll end up using a lot, which is the slide function. Super useful. There are a couple of ways that you can invoke it. And one is to come to edge slide right here. Click, hold, and drag, and just pull that in right to about there. So that's one way to invoke it. So let's come back out now, and we're ready to come in and model the bottom part, because I've said early on that this was going to be a closed volume that would be suitable for 3D printing. So we need to extract some geometry. I'm going to extract this geometry at the bottom, but because we're about to start playing with facing direction, we really need to be aware of what our current facing direction is for all of the geometry. So press the A key. Let's come over here into shaded mode, and let's turn on face orientation, and it's all red. And we don't want it to all be red. That means the normals are facing inward, and we want them facing outward. So come over to mesh, come down to normals, and then do recalculate outside. So that's really important to kind of be aware of. So let's come back down here, and let's double click, expand selection, expand selection, expand selection. And let's do one more time, expand selection. So now we need to do Shift and D to duplicate this, escape key, and then press P to separate this to become its own object. Press the Tab key to leave edit mode. And let's go ahead for right now. Let's just turn off that. And we need to change the facing direction because this is now going to be the outward facing part of the underside. So Tab key, A key, mesh, normal, and we'll just flip that. So let's go ahead and turn back on the primary object that we're working with here. And let's come over and turn off all the facing direction because that'll just get maddening with all that blue there. Wireframe, and then Option-Alt-Z so that we can see that. Now, another tool that is really useful that I'm going to kind of consider one of the secondary 5 tools that you'll want to use is the Shrink-Fatten function. This will allow you to move each polygon along its own normal direction. I'm in active tool, so I can grab anywhere, click, hold, and drag, and just push so it's outward facing or outward moving about like that. So back in edge mode, at the top up here, I'm going to take this and we're going to use Edge Slide, which is one of the 5 secondary tools that you'll really want to have become a friend because it's so useful. So we come down here to Edge Slide. Now, this is not the only way to do it, but I'm just highlighting these tools in the side so you know where they are. And then we just grab in active tool mode and we pull this down. Press the E key and then Z to extrude, and we come down about that far. We just need to connect it now, Option-Alt-Z, until we get to about this level for this bottom planar region. So let's do this in vertex mode. Some things just seem to be visually more apparent when you do things in vertex mode. So press the G key, and we only want to move along the Z direction. So press Z, but we don't have a way right off the bat of getting it figured out how you want it to get to that planar region on the bottom. So Down along the bottom, you can see it says Set Snap Base, which is the B key. Now go ahead and grab this reference point here, and then come up to this reference point, and we've gotten those two levels aligned. So now leave edit mode, select both of these objects, and invoke the join function to join them together. Tab key takes me back into edit mode, and an edge. I'm going to hold the shift key and select this edge, and then we will bridge, which is one of the 5 secondary tools that you want to get really familiar with, and we can bridge that together. So now we have a closed volume. So let's come up to the top, and I'd like to put one more loop cut around the top. Now, earlier I said that there were multiple ways to access some of these tools, one by clicking the icon and the other by invoking by a keyboard command. Press Command R, and that will allow me to just click to add a new loop here. So let's come in now and consider the bottom. We've added some control loops in. This is a control loop, this is a control loop, this is a control loop that control the way the subdivision interacts with long, straight, planar regions relative to curving regions. We've got one right there too, but we need to take care of the bottom because we don't have any. And when we turn on subdivision, this is all going to get really blobby. So this is where, again, we return back to one of our primary tools, the first of the primary tools, the bevel tool. So let's come over here and make sure it is in the 2-1 configuration, because that will leave existing edges in place, but it will add the control boundaries for us. So let's come over and double click and start finding these large 90-degree angles. I'm going to add one edge in between there. I'm holding the shift key and I'm double clicking to add these loops. I'm going to pull out to make sure we've got a fork in the road here. So we need to hold the shift key down and double click right to there. And then I'm just looking. Now remember, we haven't been focusing on this side. I've basically left this there just to allow loops to sort of travel along. If I had manually removed all of those, we could end up with some weird end segments there, and I don't want that to happen. So here again, I want to just select one edge segment beyond the symmetry point. Now let's come back over here and see I've got one right here. Double click with the shift key to add that. Okay, so now we come in. Oh, I've got one obvious one right here. Now let's zoom in to make sure we're doing this sort of in a very detail-oriented way. Again, we're an active tool. Always remember this, so we don't have to grab a widget. Click, hold, and drag, and begin pulling, and go right to about there. It doesn't need to be any exact distance, but that'll give us the control edges that we need to produce rounding with the subdivision, but still have planar regions in between. So let's take a look at this sort of at a bird's eye view. We've basically gotten one half of it done. There's also a design element on the contact case, sort of a lip that allows you to hold it with your thumb while you're opening up the lid. So we'll go ahead and model that next. So let's come in over here and we're going to return to one of our primary tools, the loop cut tool. Command R, Control R in the PC, click, hold, and drag, and pull over until we get right to about there and click. Then let's come over into face mode. So remember, we're going to be working primarily on this side, but we are going to select one polygon here. Come till you get the first 3 polygons on the left side that we're working on. Then we just need to come over. Now I'm in active tool, so I want to switch over temporary to selection circle so I can click, hold, and drag in one click operation, and we're going to select all the way down till this boundary loop. So this boundary loop right here is planar to this region. So we don't want to extrude that up because it would be flat and it would produce overlapping polygons. We don't want that. So I'm being very careful about what I'm selecting here. Press the E key and then Z, and we're going to pull up right like that. Something to about right there. It doesn't need to be any exact length. Then in edge mode, come back to the move tool, double click this loop, and we want this to kind of slowly taper down and then come to here. So bring up the context menu and do a dissolve loop, and there we go. Now we do want to come back over here to these planar edges right here, and we want to take and we want to move these up until they come right about to the same position that they were before. So then we've got one mismatch vertex right here. Let's go ahead and dissolve that. Press the 1 key to go into vertex mode, and we'll take these two vertices and we'll use our connect vertex path function. Let's isolate these polygons that we're working on right here. In fact, as I'm looking at this too, let's go into X-ray mode, Option Alt Z. I actually think, and I want to be in select box, I actually think that I want to take these and make this a little bit thinner, about like that. Okay, so you can see how I'm flopping back and forth between X-ray mode. It's just a pain for me to constantly say, going to X-ray mode, going out of X-ray mode, right? So we want to isolate these because we're starting to get into some more complex topology. So I'm going to come back over here into select circle, hold the shift key, and we're going to select. If you over select like that, that's okay. Just hold the control key down and that will deselect under this condition. And we grab there, and we want to grab these back polygons. We want to hide everything but the selected polygons. So press Shift and H, so those are temporarily hidden. And then we can come in, let's come into vertex mode. And again, I want to make sure that I'm in X-ray. So now we can take these here and move these up like that. And then these center ones, we'll take these and we'll move them up just a little bit more so we can see this curvature coming down like that. So let's come in now and return all the polygons that we've turned off. So press Option H and that will return everything. Option Alt Z to leave X-ray. And we need to add secondary control geometry so that we can get just rounding around these corners, but still we want to maintain how planar it is on the areas that we want it to be flat. So we're going to come over into edge mode and we're going to add our first one right here. So right now, if we leave this, the subdivision will give us this very shallow swoopy curve right here. And I want this to be a little bit more kind of sudden, but with still a little bit of curvature. So I'm adding these edges right to here. And then we're going to come over, making sure that we're in active tool so that we can grab back to our friend, the bevel tool, one of our 5 primary main tools. And you can see how many times we've used that so far. We want to make sure we're in the 2-1 configuration. Click, hold, and drag and pull out and just add something about like that. That works pretty well. Let's come over and anchor this vertex here. Hold the shift key, select there, bring up the context menu or type the M key and do at last. And you see how that has anchored that right there. Okay, and we can do the same thing over here, but we do want to do just a little bit of cleanup work. I think I want to select this vertex, hold the shift key, and I have assigned that at last to the quick menu. So I press the Q key and do at last, and that will drop that right there. So that's one little minor thing that we've corrected. So you can see we're really getting into some nitty-gritty polygon editing now. So let's come over and do the same thing here. Back into edge mode, double click here, hold the shift key, double click here. We want to add those control loops on either side, but I want to come here, hold the shift key, and let's add one more edge to that loop right there, to those 2 loops right there. We're still in the bevel tool. We're still in our 2-1 configuration with active tool. Click, hold, and drag, and just pull up until you get something about like that. That works pretty well. So we've got a little bit of cleanup work to do over here. Blender's bevel tool is really good, but it still, with very complex geometric intersections, it can still leave some muddiness. So let's clean this up. Let's come over to vertex, and you can see, press Option Alt Z to go into X-ray. So we've got a bunch of kind of things going on here. I'm going to select, it looks like there's one right in the middle that we probably want to use as a reference. Select all of the other ones and then select that middle one as the last, and then press the M key and then do at last, and it will merge those all together and clean that up. Option Alt Z. Now we're going to go back to one of our other 5 main tools, the knife tool, this area right here, when it subdivides, is not going to be as tightly controlled as we'd like it to be because of these long, thin polygons that come to these triangle points. So we're going to press the K key, click here, come out one more, and then we're going to anchor that right there. And that will produce a little bit better control here. Now we can do the same thing here. Let's come back over K key, click here, and anchor that right there, hit return. And this is going to help to introduce just enough geometry in this area that will help control that. And we won't really see that it's affecting the topology too much. So there's one little last detail right here. Let's take this point. I know it's a little hard to see. Hold the Shift key, select here, M key, and then do at last, and that will anchor that. I think we're in a place where we can test all this out, see what the subdivision looks like at this point. Tab key leaves edit mode. Let's go ahead and turn shade smooth on. We want to come over and we want to specifically enable subdivision, and let's take this up to a value of 2, and then let's come over and take a look at this in smooth shading, and we can see how that looks. Now again, we're only focusing on this side. We're going to go ahead and throw away all that, the other side that we're using sort of as a dead man's land, but we just want to look here. But I want you to notice that as we throw this around, there's something a little bit wonky going on right here. So we can correct that. Let's go ahead, press the Tab key, and let's turn off subdivision temporarily. So I can use this point as a reference because we have all this planar region. In fact, let's establish that. Let's select right here and do select linked flat faces. So it's telling me that something's a little bit wonky right here. So let's correct this, because this is something that very much could happen to you during the modeling process. So I have goofed somehow, probably during the uplift when I was moving these vertices up, I accidentally grabbed the vertices back here. This is very easy to correct. We have the planar region over here, and so we can use those as a reference. I'm going to select these points here, and I've selected purposely that one here as the last one. Press the G key. I only want to move up and down along the Z-axis. Now see, I've got something else selected right here, so we want to make sure we're clear about that. G, Z, and then press B to establish a snapping reference on the active vertex, and come down here and move that down, and it will move it to that level. Let's do the same thing over here really quick. G, Z, B key, click, and find one of your planar points, and there we go. So we corrected that. Now let's come in and take a look at this with subdivision turned back on, and let's turn off overlays, and it's better over here, but now we have something going on right here. Let's correct that. So let's turn our overlays back on. Let's go ahead and turn off subdivision so we can clearly see what we've got going on. Let's come over into the Move tool. Let's switch over to Select Circle, and I'm just going to select everything that I think might possibly be kind of affected here. These things that I want. I'm going to remove these that I think should be planar. And I can kind of see that there's an uplift right here going on also already. So we'll just select everything there, switch over into vertex mode, hold the Shift key and make that the active vertex. It's in the middle of all this planar region. Press the period key and make sure that we are at the active element for our reference point. In fact, it may be useful to come over to the Move tool so that you can see where the reference point is for flattening. S key, we only want to go along Z, and then type in 0. And did you see how it flattened our goof there? So let's leave edit mode and let's turn subdivision back on. Now we don't have that weird thing going on. So it's just a matter of kind of looking at stuff. Let's switch now to a place where we can actually put correct geometry on the other side. So let's do this. Let's actually come over and remove everything. I know the mirror tool can remove geometry for us, but I'm going to have us come into the front view, make sure X-ray is turned on. We're going to come into select box, and I'm going to have us just remove all of that. So X key, remove those faces. Then we can add a modifier of the mirror type. And let's go ahead and put that up top here. Okay, there we go. Tab key leaves edit mode. Let's go ahead and look at this in shaded. And there we can see that little lip for the thumb to hold against. And we've gotten everything done to this point, but we've got one really important thing to do in terms of really constraining the subdivision in a way that's important for hard body modeling. There's also something we need to finish on the bottom. There's some irregularity in the subdivision because I haven't put proper geometry in there. Let's go ahead and quickly take care of that. So let's go ahead and turn off subdivision. We'll turn off the mirror so we're really focused. And let's go into wireframe, Option-Alt-Z for X-ray, and we can look at the bottom. So we want to put specific rounding here. The actual physical contact lens case that I have has a fairly rounded fillet coming around this bottom. So let's tab key go back into edit mode. Let's select this boundary loop, period key. Let's go back to bounding box center, S key, and let's scale that out. Let's scale that out just a little bit. Command R to put a loop. So there's one of our tools. Click, and we're going to use one of our primary tools again, the bevel tool, and we will come over and let's set this one to 3, but we want to go back to 0.5, and I can grab the handle here and we'll pull that out. It's a fairly significant bevel on this underside. And then let's take this. So we did slide before by coming over and specifically invoking the tool, but you can press the G key a second time, and it will put you into slide mode. So let's come in and turn subdivision back on. So we want one final thing to do, Option Z to go into X-rays. We want to come up here and we want to look at this connection point here. And this is subdividing currently, and it's really going to be ill-defined. If we turn on subdivision, we can turn that on, and you can see that it's really ill-defined. So let's come in and add some geometry for that. Again, we're going back to the bevel tool, but in this case, we're going to do a very simple 1.5. Let's come over to active tool, click, hold, and drag, and we'll bevel that down about like that. And then Command R to put a loop, click, hold, and drag as a boundary right about there. And then when we turn subdivision back on, we can see that that has basically sort of constrained what's going on. So this is one of the great things about learning to use all these tools, is that it's just a handful of tools that are giving us all of this control. So let's come in and take a look at this with shaded on. And we've got a much better control. But the major final operation before we do the cap is to add constraint geometry, because it's not as defined as I would like it to be, and we want to take care of some details here. So we're ready to do some of the really fine-tuning work. It's a little bit soft around these edges, and this is where we can use the creasing function to really correct this. So let's come back into edit mode. And we can see right here, if we double click on these loops, we had used the bevel tool to put in these control loops. And so we're going to spend the time really quick to select all of these control loops like this and here. And if we move this over, there's a fork in the road, and so it stops. And in fact, I can select this one here and this here, double click. Let's move around. I've got one right here. So let's take a look at this. If I turn off, in fact, let's do this here and do this here. If we turn off subdivision surfaces, we can see that I have selected all of those control loops that we put in. This gives us rounding in the tight corners, but it helps to keep flat areas flat. But without the creasing, it's still allowing a little bit of the curvature to come in. So let's go ahead and turn back on subdivision, N key, let's come over and set the crease up to a value of 1 to correct that. So let's go ahead and turn off overlays, And you can see that it just sort of visually tightens up, and the fillets around these corners are a little bit tighter. We can actually come over here now. Let's turn the creases off because those are still selected. Let's go ahead and turn those back to 0. And it's subtle, but it's just a little bit softer. So let's turn this back to 1. And it just is such a subtle but a really nice detail on hard body models. This is what will separate you from other people that don't use this technique. Okay. So yeah, let's come up to the top here. Let's turn overlays back on. And let's do the same thing here and here and here. Select this one. Come over and do a mean crease of 1. And that is great. So we've got to look at this area right here. This loop. Let's set the mean crease to 1 on it. There's 1. The fork in the road often prevents those loop selects, so you'll just need to look for those. And here, and here, and here, and here, and here. So again, let's set the mean crease up, and that will just tighten those regions up. Okay, and then we can press the Tab key to leave edit mode. We can see how nice and clean our hard body modeling is when we add those creases in. Let's go ahead and turn back on the mirroring. There we go. So that is the main body, and that's pretty much done now. And we're ready to model the cap that connects to it and closes down.